thank you, Zara, for coordinating this event. I know it's a lot of work and hard. And thank you again to OnePiece for hosting us. It's always great to see innovative models about VCs and co-working space combined together. It's always interesting to see things that are working in innovative ways. So I'm Dan Luedke. I'm the product marketing manager here at Dragonchain. Testing.
So I think the microphone is too excited too. It would go to sleep for some reason. So
I work for Dragonchain. I'm the product marketing manager, and
sure, I'm John Bonazza. I'm the founder, CEO, and technical director at SummerPlay Games. I've been in the game industry for a long time, almost 6 years now. I've been a gamer since I was a child, like most people here I'm sure have been. Yeah, I worked with Joe at a previous startup back on the East Coast several years ago, and yeah.
All right, I'm Joe Roets, CEO, founder of Dragonchain. Probably working now, so I can hear it. CEO and founder of Dragonchain, and we're headquartered in Bellevue. We were started at Disney as a hybrid blockchain platform. The first to interchain with Bitcoin, and we have a lot of interesting, cool techs.
Working, so I'll just
keep
that down. Yeah. I'm James Mayo. I work at a company called 8 Circus Studios. I'm the founder there. My background's in production, in video game development. I've been in games, at least in terms of development, for like 30 years. Started at Nintendo and Microsoft. Worked at smaller companies like Day One Studios, which turned into wargaming.net. And we're super fortunate at 8 Circus Studios to have a bunch of folks who come from AAA as well. And so our objective really was to try and bring that experience to blockchains and marry the two, see if there was a way to introduce a new group of people to blockchains as opposed to like crypto enthusiasts, just basically bring gamers. So, that's me.
So I'm Gary Hall. Thank you for having me at this whole event and everything. And I'm a country boy from North Carolina, if you can't tell. I also I've been in the IT industry for over 20 years, and I spent probably over a decade at Cisco Systems working with their state-of-the-art supercomputers, where I basically built out a lot of their data centers worldwide. And after which we pretty much automated this whole process, and it was fun and got to work with a lot of cool technology. So fast forward a little bit more, here I am with BitGamer, and we are trying to bring a whole new revolution to gaming for all the gamers out there through blockchain. And that's going to be through ways of competing and winning prizes and cryptocurrency and all kinds of other things. So there's a lot of exciting things that BitGamer is trying to bring through blockchain that I don't think anyone's quite yet seen yet.
So Gary, what got you into gaming?
I've always been probably a gamer. I'd have to say maybe starting at the age of 3. So I've always been in IT. My dad had a computer whenever I was a baby. And so basically by the time I was 3, I was able to load up the Commodore 64, put in Boulder Dash, and play Boulder Dash. So that's all I wanted to do at 3, and that's what I did. So I still enjoy gaming. I had to take a break in the 90s after competing at LAN tournaments and having like a little local clan that we established back in the southeast. And then I took that, put it on a little bit of a break so I could pursue my career. And that's when I worked with Cisco and did all of these, you know, high-end type job responsibilities. And now it's time that I feel like it's to bring it back to the gamers and to bring some technology and to bring some things to gamers and to help make it where maybe they can earn a little bit of money while they're playing video games sitting at home every day.
What about you, James? What got you into gaming?
Very similar story. Was lucky enough to have a computer in the household. Got that from my dad, so we just started playing on that. It was an Amiga. Tried to start figuring out how to program. A lot of games came through. I don't know how many viruses I got onto his system, but he had to continue to clean that poor sucker off. But after that, I ended up being really lucky again because Nintendo is local here, and they were just starting to blow up in the 90s from the NES system. They needed gameplay counselors, and so I applied, was lucky enough to get a job there. And then that kind of opened up my career to games. So started in gameplay counseling, went to QA. From there, got into production, tried to really figure out how to build games, get them from concept to release, and then into gamers' hands. And it's been, oh, is it working now?
Is it working now? Yeah. And then, yeah, that was how I got into games. So I've got this in my hands.
I'll have a much shorter one. So I played on Commodore 64, Ultima, and a lot of just old games, not connected. And when I started my career, it was still pre-internet and it was not as cool as it is now. So I went to more things.
So very similar to the other two. Through my father, I was lucky enough to have a computer growing up. Like many software engineers, games are what got me into the programming path. As I got older, made a number of hobbyist games. None of them were released really or published. It was more just a hobby at that point. Once I graduated college, I started working on an open source 2D game engine for more learning experience, and then at that point I went on to work for Sony on the cloud gaming engineering and infrastructure team, building backend services for the PlayStation Now game streaming service, and then in December 2018 I started SummerPlay, trying to marry blockchain into gaming.
Nice. I'm a Commodore 64 guy too, so. So how does gaming fit in with blockchain? I mean, the two seem kind of different technologies. How would you combine the two together?
So I think blockchain has a number of use cases in gaming. I think that right now we are just on the cusp of it, and I think that technology-wise we're not quite there to fully take advantage of everything blockchain has to offer. But I mean, right now you're already seeing the mini games taking advantage of the tokenization of assets. That's pretty standard stock in pretty much any blockchain-enabled game these days. But I know there's companies like Zaya in Europe, I believe, that are working on completely decentralized back-end systems for games. So running, your next MMO on completely decentralized and open source back-end server. But I think the scarcity is another way that blockchain can play into it. For instance, in the game we're building, all the weapons that happen to be tokenized on the blockchain have a history associated with them. So you can take advantage of various things, like if you take the Twitter verified user following paradigm, you can make it so that, for instance, Keanu Reeves used this weapon in my game. It is provably him because he's verified on the blockchain. This is Keanu Reeves. And if you then sell that in a marketplace, it has more value than any other weapon might have. So I think that tokenization along with scarcity is a big thing going forward as well.
And I would agree. Scarcity is huge. You think about leaderboard. You think about transfer of assets between games or between communities. That is, you can have provable activity that when I take it somewhere else, you can implement provable fairness, right? And that could even be all the way down to dice games and betting games, but it can be a rolled character or something as well that. That this person didn't cheat in getting this asset, right? That there's a lot of neat things there, but all of it ends up being important for reasons of adoption. That is, if I can know that this is fair, that I'm not being cheated, I I might put more time into it, I might play more. If there's a profit incentive, there are a whole bunch of really neat things you can plug in. So it's almost certainly going to happen.
I wanted to add something to that. In 2014, I wrote a white paper on a thing called Gold Piece, where it was basically a way to smooth out the gold farming and that's rampant in many online games. I submitted it on Reddit, and it had a number of issues that people found, and I massaged those and fixed them, and then never really did anything with it. But I think that blockchain presents a unique opportunity to kind of embrace gold farmers, I guess you could say, and give them a direct form of monetization in the game that previously they've never had before. And that's going to be very exciting to see, I think, going forward.
So I got maybe a question for you guys. If you could just show with your hands, like, how many of you would consider yourselves gamers? Great. Okay, and then how many people would consider themselves game developers? Okay, so there's more gamers than game developers. So one of the ways in which, at least as a developer, it helps to think about blockchains is almost like asking an analog question, which is like, well, how would hard drives be beneficial to games? So if you kind of think about it in those context, or in that context, you can think about blockchains in a similar way, which is what do they do well, and then what do they not do well. So I think games are going to make use of blockchains just like they did hard drives, and just like they do RAM and GPUs. But that's sort of the technical side. I think that there's probably maybe 3 or 4 ways to think about what blockchains do in terms of sort of general philosophy. So one philosophy is to use blockchains for persistence. That's just to keep something public and make sure that it lasts forever, or at least as long as that blockchain is open or being run. I think the second thing that you can think about is interoperability. So if you have something that lives on the blockchain forever, you can also have that thing work between games or versions of the game over time. And then the third thing to think about is once you have persistence, and once you have interoperability, you can start to do some really cool stuff on blockchains that you can't necessarily do, say, on a hard drive, which is, at least on Ethereum, probably Dragonchain, is you can actually have it inherit logic or use logic. So that means you can have this thing mutate over time. And so one of the ways in which people oftentimes like to experience their games is through characters. And so this is something that's new, that's actually pretty cool. I think John's got something cooking that's like that. We're working on something very similar with Project Genesis, which is putting a character on the blockchain that can live forever, and then have this character mutate over time or change. So there's a whole bunch of really cool stuff that can come out of that, and that character can then move between games. So that's just one example that if you're thinking about how blockchains work, you might apply something that's pretty standard in games.
I actually had a very similar thought to yours on the second part, but a little bit different. So to me, a blockchain is, you break it down, it's a ledger of data, or ledger of stuff that's happened. Now, if you could take that ledger, and since it never dies and it constantly grows, if you made that into a game platform and put a player inside of it, couldn't the blockchain itself be a game? Because it constantly changes, which would create an environment for a gamer that never stays the same. You just need to have an input for a gamer to control the environment or be a part of it. So in a way, so to answer your question, I see a lot of potential, and like that's just one way. I also think that with blockchain and gaming, that gaming is only going to keep growing. It's getting a lot more attention. A lot of money is in gaming, and people are realizing that. They're realizing a lot of people are playing these things, and there's a market. So with that, I see it growing more in like the Olympic sports in the future. It's not quite made it there, but there has been talks of where gaming might one day become an Olympic sport. And if it does reach to that point, I think having blockchain there that can record everything that happens, all the matches, and players can't change who they beat, who they lost against, it makes it where that whole Olympic sport, I feel like, would be a little bit more solid, and you couldn't change your data. You can't say, oh, I actually beat Mike Tyson over here a month ago, because it's on a blockchain. It's proven. So once gaming itself gets more and more reputable and people start seeing it as more or less an Olympic sport where they need to have proof, then I see it where it's going to have a lot more of an implication.
I want to add one thing to what James said around having the characters on the blockchain, and that's one of the hardest parts of building an online game is actually after you launch it, reaching critical mass, getting people to actually play your game. Having a character on the blockchain and interrupting that character between games allows smaller developers who don't necessarily have the resources to reach critical mass easily to bootstrap their player base with a number of pre-existing players, essentially. I think the biggest challenge there is actually going to be how to make blockchain so ubiquitous that the average person is going to understand it well enough. And that may just be as simple as finding a convenient UI on top of it for making this work. So I think that's actually very exciting after he's mentioned it.
Excellent. How does your organization currently implement blockchain for your specific game? And Joe, you probably don't have a game, so.
So I actually haven't even announced my game yet. So, but as I mentioned earlier, we use it in a number of different ways. One of them, as James alluded to, is that we have the characters on the blockchain. Specifically for the purpose of interoperability with our future games as well as other games who want to use it. The history of weapons are recorded on the blockchain. As I mentioned, this allows us to do things like a social mechanism where Keanu Reeves, I'll use it to give my example since he is hot in the media right now. He plays our game for a week, he evolves this weapon. The weapon is evolved over time, so everyone's weapon is unique to them. There's no pre-existing legendary or epic weapons, and players can sell those weapons on an auction, in-game auction house, for cryptocurrency, and then that cryptocurrency is fed back into our ecosystem. We take a cut of it, so back into our ecosystem to pay for the transactions on the blockchain. So it's kind of like a looping pipeline there, a cycle. So that's probably our biggest feature. We have some other ones, but I'm not really quite ready to talk about them yet. So, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Which blockchain do you use?
Right now, we're using Dragonchain. We're partnered with them to create this, but with Dragonchain's interoperability features, it's very easy to use any other chain we wish to use as well. The convenient thing about using Dragonchain, since our processing on our actual smart contracts are running on Dragonchain, having the dragons as the actual token that is being exchanged in the auction house makes it very convenient. You don't have to do any transformation or worry about exchange rates or anything like that. Of course, the legality side of things is that, in our game, you won't be able to sell the tokens for USD, but you can very much pull them out of your wallet into a different wallet and then do what you will with them, of course, abiding by your country's laws.
We're using Ethereum, and we are, you've kind of already heard me talk a little bit about using them for using Ethereum for characters. We're also categorizing two other ways in which we use the blockchain. So the second way we use it is with property, and the third way is kind of the catch-all, which is items. And so for characters, for us, it's basically legacy between versions of our game. And then interoperability happens with property. We have a partner game that we're working with, Mankind Reborn. They're a cyberpunk MMO, and so you can actually have a building that occupies space in our game as well as in the MMO. So those are the ways in which we're using the blockchain.
All right, so we are using blockchain in a lot of different ways. We're offering a social platform where basically if a gamer finds a trick in a game that they want to post, they can post that if another gamer likes it and they want to donate a microtransaction towards that idea, they can. We're also offering blockchain where it's storing match data, so therefore we can create a global ranking and rating system for all gamers, regardless of what platform you're playing on, whether it be PlayStation, Xbox, PC, or whether it's your grandmother playing bingo down the road. The idea is that any game should be able to be stored on a blockchain and should be just as equal of a game. So we're storing as much as we really can on the blockchain. We are taking the blockchain and we're really trying to use it for what it can be used for. There is cryptocurrency, obviously. That's where the gamer can always cash out, get their money, get their earnings, and go to an ATM if they wish and get their funds. But the idea is really that with blockchain, you can store and you can do a lot more than just cryptocurrency. Like cryptocurrency, it's nice, it's a great feature, but when you can store data in a public database for the public to interchange with, there's a lot of opportunities. And we're just trying to take on all of those. It's a very, very bold thing to overtake, so we're having to do one step at a time. So, if you go on BitGamer, you might see, oh, it doesn't have all of these things that I might be talking about. And that's mainly because we're having to build them out piece by piece. And it's a slow process. So we have a lot of different technologies. The main thing that we're also trying to bring would be that the match data would be stored in the blockchain, and then therefore all the gamers can, I'm coming up with blanks now, sorry guys. So now the gamers can pretty much see who they're playing against, keep a record, and it's on this blockchain for everyone to see. So, all right, I'll do it.
Great. So how do you guys go about your game design, and what are some of the challenges that you face incorporating blockchain technology?
So we were just talking about this earlier, but one of the biggest challenges we face with incorporating blockchain is that from actually a PR standpoint, blockchain is still a new thing, and it's somewhat controversial still. And the market can be very easily swayed by a simple tweet by certain people. And when you're trying to build a game, games are very expensive to make. And when you're fundraising and trying to raise funds from investors, and then the day before you raise them, somebody tweets something and completely destroys the credibility of Bitcoin temporarily, for instance, it makes it very challenging. But as far as actual design of the game, it's an interesting question. I mean, Bitcoin. Blockchain is just another feature to us. I mean, there's nothing, as Joe once said, blockchain is really just a very slow database. There's nothing magical about it. There's no reason it should be treated in your design different than any other blockchain or any other feature. So I don't think there's that much of a design challenge really to it. You just have to understand the strengths and weaknesses of blockchain, like James alluded to, and try not to overuse it for things it isn't useful for. A lot of things that people try to use blockchains for are just as easily done with databases but because blockchain is hot right now, you know, they try to use blockchain for it. So I think that's actually the biggest challenge.
Oh man, it's the worst. Like, getting into blockchains to start was really exciting, and then actually having to deal with them was super challenging. We actually had to learn this lesson like multiple times. And so the lesson was, be careful what you put on the blockchain. And so we eventually learned, because CryptoKitty is probably the most famous example. They have a lot of their game logic that is actually on blockchain, which is great. At one level, because you can just basically run it independent of a server, and so it just kind of works as long as you're willing to pay the transaction fees. Away you go. But if you actually want to have, you know, an all deference to Dapper Labs, if you want to actually have fun on the blockchain, at least in terms of the high demands that like gamers who are hardcore gamers kind of expect, really tough to give the gamer a really good experience when you're dealing with what we call transaction viscosity, which is high fees, or you know, you just can't predict what kind of volatility the network might have at any given moment. So it's a really big challenge. And so we actually learned that we need to go in the other direction, which is just barely touch the blockchain. And I think one of the ways in which we figured that out was being able to run at a pretty, what we call a pretty high frame rate, which just means that we iterate quickly, we make a lot of mistakes, we hopefully learn from those mistakes, and then in our case, we just have the kind of cliched philosophy, but it's a philosophy that seems to work for us, is find the fun. And it's really a lot of experiments. We try to use our own compass to figure out what's working. In fact, for Project Genesis, we actually had to reboot it once and then do a pretty major reconfiguration twice, because it originally started out as a homage to FTL, which is Faster Than Light. It's basically a roguelike game. And the reboot, we realized we weren't able to make a lot of progress. It wasn't fun to us. And so we just played to our strengths, which is basically first-person shooters and space combat. And when we leaned into that, we kind of found our heart. So our philosophy isn't like something that's architected like a beautiful skyscraper. It's much more like a cathedral. Kind of build it as you go, and hopefully the thing's still standing when you're finished. So that's our approach.
We've run into quite a few challenges. Other than the obvious, which blockchain do you choose out of the however so many? And then you gotta look at the gas cost of the blockchain, how much data you're putting in your blockchain, the volume of data, and in and out. So, we have to look at, we're looking at a lot of data going in and out, because there's a lot of gamers every day playing games. So, there's something we have to keep in mind is how are we going to support, how can a blockchain support such high volume at one time? So, we've had to, come up with some creative ways of working with that data. Another thing was some of the legal issues that, you have to deal with when you start talking about blockchain, and kind of echo some off of what John was saying earlier with, things are very volatile to a degree. One day it's one thing, and then next week it's something different, and it makes it extremely difficult to build anything off of a platform that doesn't have any substance to it sometimes. And so, with that, we have to figure out, if someone wants to get rid of their data, what if they don't want to be a part of this anymore? How do you remove data out of a blockchain that's not supposed to be removable? So, you have simple things like that you also have to, figure out workarounds for. So, I mean, there's solutions. You just have to be willing to think outside the box.
Can I say something? I think two things. We solved all those problems. So that is one thing. At least we've talked about it. And then the second is that I
think, because you brought up CryptoKitties for some reason, I'm thinking, okay, probably the most adopted blockchain game in existence
Fair.
is not CryptoKitties, but Binance. Maybe Bittrex, right? Binance, right?
So, in today's video games, like Fortnite, there's in-game redemption codes for options for players. Do you guys think that blockchain can be a solution in the marketplace for like B2C transactions and removing the intermediary of like these big game studios and networks? Do you think that changes the tides?
I don't like going first because I don't get to build off of other people's statements, but I think
one chance for now.
Yeah, I think absolutely yes. I mean, we're trying to do that in our game as well. It can be challenging. I think the cyclic nature that I was talking about earlier is very important because, as Dave alluded to earlier in the last question, that it's not free to post transactions on the blockchain. So if you put a lot of stuff on the blockchain, whether it's B2C transactions or just game mechanics or whatever, it does add up quickly. So I think B2C transactions are a great way to kind of fund those other transactions in your game by kind of investing the money you make, taking a cut of those transactions back into the ecosystem.
And I'll say from a platform context that it's really interesting because you have to pay attention to the architecture early. We try to make as many things flexible and abstracted as possible because we know you don't know what you don't know when you first start. And that's building an enterprise system as well as a game. Some of those things are the transaction fees, right? That is, if you want to have a hybrid environment, especially a hybrid token, you might have in-game currency that doesn't have to all be on a public chain. That is, you can let the in-game currency be relatively cheap, and when someone actually, if you choose to allow it, withdraw, you can charge them the fees right then. They can pay the Ethereum fees. They can pay if it's on Neo, if it's on Binance. They can pay those fees. So you're not out, in fact, that's where you make your margin, right? And that's an interesting point. And the other is on the legal side. So anyone who's been involved in a blockchain project, especially since 2016, 2017, has probably spent a radical amount of money on legal, right? That the lawyers came in and they realized, oh, there's a lot of fear that we can stoke here, right? So which means money, right? So lawyers and fear. Hand in hand with all the regulatory agencies, it's all built in, it's a machine, and you need to stay away from that. So especially if you're a small studio, if you're a small business, you need to stay away from as much of that legal as you can, and you can address it early. So if you can separate that and say, you can have the public, the currency if you want, or if it's a non-fungible. And the beauty is, there are ways to let the user take advantage of those, the tradability, and also the security. It's like if they don't want to trust me, trust you for holding those assets on your machine, on your keys, they can put it in their own safe in cold storage. They can come back a year later and it's like, my weapon is, it's some rare thing or whatever. It's a really interesting point because you have better security, you have better practice, you have, and you can stay away from all the legal pitfalls that you with operating an exchange or something, right? So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, Joe ain't joking. Like, we spent so much time on legal, to Gary's point as well. It's an inordinate amount of time. In fact, it was pretty interesting because we were so deep into it. We were helping the lawyers understand, even though I love our lawyers, but we were helping them understand, and then we didn't get any fees for that. So that was unfortunate part of that little relationship. But really, yeah, I mean, from my perspective, all I can do is echo Joe. I think it's an opportunity, not necessarily for companies within the U.S., because there's a lot of regulatory hurdles to go through and ambiguity. But it provides a great opportunity for game companies that are operating outside of the United States or some places that are a little more forward-looking, like Eastern Europe, Estonia. I think they're pretty lenient. Malta, I think there's a couple others, but you guys probably know more than me. But yeah, I think the U.S. It might have a tough time. It's a pretty big market, but there's definitely opportunity for other countries to take advantage of that.
I'm just going to go ahead and agree with the lawyer situation. Not only that, but it can be very, very difficult to find someone that even knows enough about the technology that you even feel competent with, or they seem competent at all with it. So that can be a challenge itself, just because it's such a newer technology. You know, it can be tough. Now, I would like to see where they would actually take and incorporate a crypto wallet with every game. So therefore, you could move your funds from one game to another. And the gamer wouldn't be bound to which game they're playing, or by whichever one they might have spent $20 that weekend. Because they could just take that $20 worth of credits and move it to a different game that they decide they want to play with their friends the next week. That in itself, I think, would be a really nice feature that if gamers would be able to could have in the market. That would be great. It's just that I think there's other companies that don't want to lose a percentage of their market, so they we can't really have too much. But yeah, I would love to be able to see e-wallet integrations.
Something to add to that as well, sorry. So, when you're working with mobile devices, and also when you're working on a platform like Steam, they want a cut of every in-app purchase that goes through your game. And I think crypto is going to either provide a convenient loophole for that, or they're going to crack down on it and somehow, I don't know how that's going to work, but until somebody tries it for the first time, I think it's still nebulous at this point.
Great. There seems to be some discrepancies between in-game like pseudo-currencies and cryptocurrencies. Can you guys help explain what the difference is between those?
When you mean in-game pseudo-currency, you mean like
just credits.
The credits are usually for like a cash shop?
Yeah, just other things.
I think this was kind of covered by the previous question, but I think that cryptocurrency, if done right, can provide a convenient alternative, potentially, to pseudocurrencies, as you called it. But there are legal considerations to make there, especially in the US, like James mentioned. But I don't think that fundamentally they're that different. I mean, I guess it depends on how you're using cryptocurrency. I'm not quite sure I totally understand the question, but maybe we'll come back to it after I hear some hammer.
Too late. What is it? Something I'm interested in that relates to that is whenever you have a game that is worldwide, and that I've heard complaints on some of them where there might be some rule that China puts in place that makes something impossible, so they totally screw up the economy for Westerners, and probably vice versa, right? But that with a hybrid, that is, if we have a currency that's in-game that you can make operate externally, you can put those rules in place. You can have some decentralized identity, a lot of what Danny works on, where you don't need to know who they are, but you can know, okay, we at least have the credential that they are in America, or they are in Singapore, or they are in China, and therefore these rules apply. And it doesn't upset the economy for others, right? But you can still follow whatever rules you have to do as a company. So interesting stuff there. Lots of really neat things if you're talking about a hybrid approach. So.
Yeah, I think, let's see, so the most basic way that I understand it is if we've got fiat, we've got crypto, And then if you think about a barrier there, that's kind of an open system. And then you've got the pseudo currencies or digital currencies. That's behind like a walled garden. So like Fortnite would be an example with V-Bucks. There's your kind of pseudo currency. It's all managed. It's basically lets Epic run as the central bank. They can print as much as they want or not, or sell it. But then there's a directionality. So it can only go in that direction from fiat into the virtual currency. Can't go the other direction. You can't the virtual currency then allows you to buy virtual items, and that's about as far as it goes. And actually can't go the other direction, which you're not allowed to go from virtual items into virtual currency and then into either crypto or fiat. So that's kind of the way in which it works on a regulatory and sort of functional way. That's what I know.
To me, it's a difference in night and day. In-game currencies, they're valueless to a degree. It's like monopoly money. I mean, you know, they can print more, they can give you more. Does it mean it's worth anything? No, it's not worth nothing. It's just worth whatever it is in the game. So, actual tangible monies that you can use outside the game anywhere, that's value. So I don't really see what they're giving you in the games as far as these pseudo currencies. I don't really see that as a currency. That's just a way for them to, like, in between. You give me money, we'll give you this until you spend that in this money. That's digital money. Another thing is in-game currencies, they're non-redeemable, non-transferable, and they are non-fungible. So, you know, you can't transfer it, you can't move your money from one place to another. It's there, that's where it stays. You can't take it out once you spend it. You know, you can't get a refund. Oops, I accidentally hit purchase. Yeah, that don't work. You know, so I mean, and another big thing to me is cryptocurrency, they tax you. You don't get taxed on any kind of pseudo-currency game. So I don't see them being anywhere near the same. It's the pseudo-currency games, it's a placeholder. So when you deposit money, it goes into that until you decide where you want to put it, versus the actual currency, which is like fiat or something that's spent and then used.
Great. Let's go ahead and wrap up this round. What are you guys most excited about blockchain and gaming, and where do you see the future headed?
So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, I think that blockchain has a lot of potential to revolutionize gaming. I would love to see, as I mentioned, just centralized federated backend servers for games. I think that being able as a player to host your own node in your game's network is going to be incredibly revolutionary as time goes on. I don't think that we are there from a technology standpoint to really capitalize on a lot of the potential of blockchain in games. I think that, and it's not something that's going to happen over the next year, I don't think. It's going to be a slow burn, I believe. But I think that in the next 5, maybe 10 years, you're going to see a very different gaming landscape than you do today. I already know, I can't say that, never mind.
So I think it's interesting because, like I say, prior question, one of the most exciting things is probably adoption. So you go to the prior question, and I think a big piece of that, at least what should be a big piece of that, is the actual value. That if I can play a game and have actual value, then the actual value in the game actually means something, right? So at least, you know, if I were an economist, I would want to be studying these, well, for one thing, cryptocurrencies, but if you can apply a cryptocurrency in a game, it becomes there can be a massive amount of experimentation, all different factors applied, you know, to tune the economy itself and also to tune people's activity. As you know, you get people bonuses for playing more often. You get people bonuses for taking breaks. You can do a lot of neat things And yet, the lawyers and the regulators have kind of gotten in the way of a lot of it, because, you know, it's basically, you're talking about these games that they're single direction, that the money can flow this way, it can't flow back. It's all because of the lawyers, right? So it would be nice if that weren't there, right? And it's like, why not at least, and this is not a question for this panel, right? But theoretically, it should be, it's more traceable than what would be there otherwise. People still sell that stuff anyway, still sell the accounts, it's not traceable. If you at least allowed it, then it's like, okay, you can actually apply the freaking taxes if you want to take the taxes, whatever, anyway. So that's one of the big things, because that would be, that's the massive place, and I know it'll happen, and it'll happen in different ways, because there's still ways to do it. But.
So I think short to medium term, definitely it's adoption. Like whatever the first kind of, at least with games, use case that really brings crypto into a more mainstream crowd. Like I'm really fired up to see what that's going to be. We hope it's us. It may not be, but whoever it is will be their biggest cheerleader if it's not us. That's a really cool prospect. I think longer term, we talk about persistence, and one of the things that we're also really fired up about is the concept of the metaverse. And so, you know, this is way, way, way down the road, perhaps, because there's a lot of connectivity that has to happen. So if you think of it like a neuron, you're probably seeing a bunch of other experiments, and so there's going to be these 2 or 3 game companies that start working together through the blockchain, and that'll sort of be the first seed, I think, that germinates the first little starts to the metaverse. So that's one of the things we're excited about.
Well, first of all, would be excited to see all of us back up here, you know, multiple times in the future, you know, talking about how, you know, everything is growing and getting much better. I also would love to see, you know, I mean, where the gaming community can grow into. There's a huge community, and it's growing bigger every day. So I mean, it's just exciting to see how it's evolved. I mean, I started playing competitively. Well, I don't play competitively, but I did play competitively, should I say, in the 90s. And to see where it's went from there till today, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. So I mean, I'm only imagining what it's going to be in another 10 years. Like, just imagine, you know? I mean, that's the only thing I can go off of. And with technology growing, you know, there's virtual reality is around the corner. It's a lot of good stuff.
Great, thanks. Does anyone in the audience have any questions that they'd like to ask the panel? Yeah.
Has any of you considered any novel monetization or business model that isn't possible with, say, credit card? A good example of this would be a 25-cent transaction is basically not feasible with modern credit cards. That's why they do like the $20, here's the in-game currency, and then you sort of spend that down, right? But you could have a browser-based game that costs 10 cents to play once using a blockchain thing, right? Have you guys had any completely novel approaches to the game industry business that blockchain makes possible that you sort of explore?
That's a very big question. So there's a lot of things that blockchain can do, but databases can also do. I think that's what you're alluding to. But the question doesn't always have to be, can a database do it, but can a blockchain do it better? I'll use the multiverse as an example here, since it's a hot topic right now. So you could very easily have 3 different publishers, you know, working with developers of 3 different games, and all those publishers could use a single database and use that as their interoperability. You have a number of issues there from who owns the data, IP ownership. You also have technical issues such as, you know, who updates the APIs for this database, and when they do update, how do we notify everyone else that it's changed so that they can update their games. How do we coordinate those updates to the games so that they all work seamlessly? So I think that blockchain solves things in that respect, not so much that it can't be done without blockchain, but in that blockchain makes it a lot easier to do if done correctly. It's very easy to screw it up, and in that case, well, you're on your own. But that'd be my answer, I guess.
Okay, and I would say whether it's a credit card or database, or depending if it's financial or not, what blockchain makes possible at its core is provable time. That is, that something happened at that point in time, which then gives you scarcity, because you can prevent double spend, which then gives you supply, so it gives you an economy. So you can now code an economy that will drive human behavior. So games are already fun, right? And if you apply economy to it, you can affect adoption, you can affect the way people play the game, you can do things like that. But those are the core capabilities of blockchain itself, which you can't do with pre-existing financial systems without trusting, trust Wells Fargo, right? It's like you can have as many accounts as you want, right? Or some central authority, right? So it gives you all these extra capabilities that even if there's some market that, I want to do business with this person, and yet someone is telling me I can't, but with this you can, and you can actually trust them at some level because you can prove that they really did something when they said, they can show you the transaction, and you can trust it through math instead of just their word, right?
We have an option to decline the question.
Are there any other questions? Does that answer the question?
Are there any insights from like the big players like Sony, Amazon, Tencent, on what they are doing, the blockchain? Are they embracing it?
So the question is what are the big guys doing in blockchain in those areas?
I can't answer that legally.
Joe, did you want to talk?
Push that up.
It's all under NDA. Like none of us can talk to any of that stuff, even if it's outside of our anything.
I can give what's public.
Yeah, like the news.
Yeah. Be very careful with what you say.
So the big company that I know about is Ubisoft. If you haven't studied Ubisoft, basically what they're doing is they've partnered with basically it's like a kind of it's like a Y Combinator type of place, which allows blockchain game companies to come in, and they sort of have this space where they can all work and collaborate and sort of share information. And I think Ubisoft participates in that. So, I'm speculating totally here, but
is that public?
Yeah,
I didn't know it was public.
Yeah, that's public. And so here's a speculation. My speculation is, as Ubisoft, having worked at Microsoft and Nintendo as a publisher. So take that for whatever it's worth. Basically, you get this opportunity to watch like a little a petri dish, all of these paramecium kind of try their experiments, and then you can learn from that and take what works or apply that to your business model. But I would also say that what I've experienced so far is that it's harder for big companies to really want to commit to the blockchain. It's hard because it's super risky, and if they're a big company, they're already probably operating with a decent revenue model, so why screw that up? So again, that's last part's all speculation too. But
I'm just a gamer, I really don't know.
Because of the time, everyone's time is valuable. I think that would be our last question, if that's okay. And then we're gonna have the panelists gonna be here, so feel free to just reach out to them and then ask questions.
So we have time for one more question, then we're going to go into networking. Yep.
What do you think would fix crypto's PR problem? Like, is there a magical fix in your mind?
I don't know, PR.
A label on.
End of the bear market. That's really all it is. And you think about it, if what would a 5-year-old, is like, oh, it's bad or it's good. That's all people care about in the end. If you don't have a bear market, Everything is rainbows and unicorns, and you know, I think that's the magic fix. We just need to get out of this, which some of it, a lot of it was artificial, in my opinion. So it's tinfoil hat. I mean, a lot of it was intended. So anyway.
So one of the things I think of is I'm pretty optimistic that the cloud will be removed from the crypto space and the blockchain industry in general. You know, if you think about back in the 90s, a lot of people have a hard time remembering that the internet was actually illegal to do commerce on originally. Like you couldn't do it for anything other than educational purposes. And so I think as we move forward, I think as people start to awaken and they go, oh, there's an opportunity here for us to build commerce and trust and build new technologies and innovations. I think we'll move forward, but I think it takes a little bit of time, and hopefully we get through that faster than later.
I think that as humans we're naturally resistant to change, and I think that this is a new thing for us. So hopefully, like they mentioned, that in the future it'll just become more commonplace, just like the internet is now everywhere, right? It's in our pockets now. So I think it's only a matter of time, but I don't think there's anything you can necessarily actively do to solve the problem. Like, there's no magic wand, like you say, you can wave to make it go away, but I think over time it will.
Stay off crypto Twitter is one more thing.
Stay off Twitter in general.
Cool. So I'm going to say this through the lens of a game developer and a gamer who goes way back. So back in the day, it used to not be cool to be a gamer. Actually, it was pretty rare. So from my perspective, we're used to sort of being rebellious, sort of the black sheep of sort of popular culture. So I'm kind of used to that perspective, but I also think that, at least again through the lens of a game developer, like if we can make some really cool games and demonstrate some really interesting use cases that the gamers start adopting, I think that that'll transmit itself through culture. But yeah, that's my perspective.
I think some of it is just due to ignorance. A lot of people are afraid of the technology. They hear blockchain and they shut down. I don't understand it, it's too complicated. Or they hear blockchain and they automatically jump to cryptocurrency. So I think if people could understand that there was more to blockchain than just cryptocurrency, and that what it actually had to offer, and if they could see this being used in everyday life, like an automobile, I think they would enjoy it. I think they would see the use case scenarios it has to bring. And then they will sit there and say, oh wow, how else can I use this? And then, you know, all the cages will start rattling. So I think it's going to take that certain spark that strikes common sense in everyone. And once they understand it, then they want it, but right now they're just scared of it because they don't understand it. It's just some IT lingo that's above their head. And I think it's up to us to start with small innovations and to bring these small things to people that will help them understand it and help make these things grow, because that's how technology does. And we will have our limitations, we will hit our downfalls. That's how every technology it has gone. But we build onto it, we fix it. It might take us 6 months, it might take us a little bit longer, but we will fix it. It will get running, and we'll make it even better than it was before. That's how we built the computer, and we built everything else. That's how we got to the moon. So I just think it's a matter of time, and once people get comfort in it.
Sorry guys, I just want to add one little thing. So one of the coolest things that we saw as a part of our community, since we're really focused on gamers and less on crypto enthusiasts, one of the things that we noticed in our community was the very first kind of seed of what Gary's talking about. So for quite a while we'd have gamers come in and they really didn't know anything about the blockchain, and they would get curious and ask about it. And we had this sort of discussion that was happening where we were kind of going a little probably too technical, but we were describing basically what amounts to this persistence philosophy. And what was really cool is the gamer was sitting there for a moment and was like, oh, it's like a save game that never turns off. And said it way more eloquently than we could have. And it was like that moment, I was like, okay, there is a bridge that's happening. And so I think if we continue to have that cycle over time, I think eventually people will start to get it. So I'm pretty optimistic.
I'll add something else. Sorry. No, it ends up all being about the capabilities. When we were at Disney, that was the way that we sold it best, was by talking about those little bitty core capabilities, because if you didn't talk about the tech, or talk about Bitcoin, or talk about cryptocurrency, but you talked about time, you talked about proof, you talked about trust, you talked about these things that these people understood. And it wasn't gaming, right? But it was something that's like, oh, I could use it for this and this and this, and they wouldn't know if they were right, but they always were, right? They've always come in and proposed something, kind of afraid that we'd look at them like they were crazy or stupid, but they were always right. Because they understood their problems more than we ever could. They would understand the problems that they didn't even ever express because they weren't solvable, because they were usually human problems. They weren't usually technology. It wasn't that, oh, it's a system. You can always fix a system. It's really hard to fix your employees and the engineering groups and things that are people. And when they would bring us those, it was always amazing because they would have these insights. And it was all because we started doing these courses where we described the core capabilities. We would let people delve in as deep as they could technically, or they wanted to, but the main point was that we could actually show what could be done without showing everything combined. It was just these little things. So.
I don't have anything.
I have one last question, and I'm not looking for a long answer, but if any of you have a favorite blockchain-based game that's not yours, do any of you want to give a shout out to one of them?
I think what Zaya is doing with Torian is really cool. If you haven't heard of them, you should check it out. They're actually putting on an event here soon to some giveaways and stuff like that, but you can check them out.
If I would have known this question was coming, then I would have saved the finance answer.
I'm really excited about Pixel. They're doing some really cool stuff with user-generated content, and if you haven't checked them out, check them out.
I'm shamelessly going to say my head's been in the sand, and I don't know too many other crypto-type games that's out there. I've just been focusing a lot with BitGamer and trying to stay focused in us. And I don't really know exactly. I can't think of anything.
Well, thank you everyone for coming, and again, thank you to OnePiece for hosting us, and thanks for the work that Zara did with Dragonchain and sponsoring the event.
Thank you, team. Thank you, everyone.
And please stay for the social hours.